My phone lit up in the dark of the parking lot, and my mother's message sat there like it had been written with a knife. Come by yourself. Your janitor husband doesn't belong with executives. Daniel was beside me in the passenger seat, still wearing the faded navy work jacket he had changed into after his shift. He leaned close enough to read it, then sat back without saying anything for 3 full seconds. Inside the restaurant, 22 company directors were gathering in a private dining room to celebrate my mother's promotion. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, a company president waiting to raise a toast. And my mother had decided my husband was the one thing that would ruin the room. I called her with my hand shaking. She answered before the first ring finished. Emilienne, I assume you're outside. I'm with Daniel. A pause. Then her voice dropped. I told you not to bring him. Daniel looked out the windshield, his face reflected faintly in the glass. I said, he's my husband. And this is an executive dinner, she whispered sharply, not the place for awkward explanations. What explanation? You know exactly what I mean. Daniel turned toward me then, quiet as ever, and said, You don't have to defend me to people who already decided what I am. That should have made me stronger. Instead, it made my throat close. My mother continued, This is the biggest night of my career. Do not make me choose between my daughter and a mop bucket. I stared at the glowing entrance of the restaurant, where people in tailored suits were stepping from black cars. Then I said, Then I'm not coming. For once, my mother had no instant answer. When I hung up, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize, and one message before he turned it away. They're all in one room tonight. Don't ignore this. I looked at him. Daniel. He slid the phone into his pocket. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. We drove home in silence, and every few minutes, Daniel checked his phone like he was waiting for something to happen. I thought he was hurt. I thought my mother had finally pushed him past the point of pretending it didn't matter. Then, just after 9, my brother Marcus sent me a video from inside the dinner. The camera shook from under the edge of a tablecloth. My mother stood near the center of the private room in a cream suit, smiling tightly beside an unopened promotion plaque. The company president, Adrian Voss, rose with a glass in his hand. Before we toast Marlene Carter's promotion, he said, there is someone connected to this family we need to discuss. The room went still. My mother's smile faded. Voss turned his head toward her. Your son-in-law. I whispered Daniel. Then someone in the video cut in, voice sharp with recognition. Isn't he the one who... I replayed the video so many times that Marcus's shaky recording became a blur of glassware, stiff shoulders, and my mother's frozen smile. Your son-in-law. Isn't he the one who... Then it stopped. I tapped Marcus's name and called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Across the kitchen, Daniel stood by the sink with his sleeves pushed up, rinsing a coffee mug he had not used. He saw my face reflected in the dark window and shut the faucet off. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. Marcus sent me this from the dinner. Daniel watched the clip once, only once. When it cut off, he did not ask to see it again. I noticed that. What did President Voss mean? I asked. Daniel set the mug down carefully. Maybe your mother talked about me. That's not what that sounded like. He looked at the counter instead of at me. Emilienne. No, I said, stepping closer. For years you let her call you maintenance like it was your name. You laughed when she said you were good with flaws. You stood outside family photos because she said there wasn't enough room, and I let too much of it happen because I was scared that if I pushed back, she would stop loving me completely. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low. That was never your fault. It became my fault when I stayed quiet. His phone buzzed again on the counter. He did not reach for it. I did. Daniel caught my wrist, not hard, just fast enough to stop me. That was when the fear in my stomach changed shape. What are you hiding? I asked. He let go immediately and dragged a hand over his face. 6 months ago, I did contract cleanup work at a medical storage facility tied to your mother's company. I stared at him. You never told me that. I wasn't supposed to involve you. Involve me in what? He shook his head. I saw something there that didn't sit right, some disposal routes, some labels, things that should not have been handled the way they were being handled. My mouth went dry. Did you report my mother? Daniel's silence was worse than an answer. Before I could press him again, my phone rang. Mom. I almost ignored it, but Daniel said, answer. When I put it on speaker, my mother's voice came through tight and breathless, nothing like the controlled woman from the parking lot. Emilienne, listened to me carefully. Did Daniel send anything to anyone tonight? I looked at him, he looked away. Why would that matter? I asked. Because your husband is not innocent, she snapped. He has been playing a role and you have no idea who you married. Daniel's phone rang before I could respond. The caller ID lit up across the counter. President Adrian Voss. Daniel picked it up and put it on speaker. A man's voice came through, calm but urgent. Mr. Hale, I need you at the restaurant now. Bring the original license file. Daniel closed his eyes. And I whispered, what license file? By the time Daniel and I walked back into the restaurant, the hostess already knew his name. Mr. Hale, she said, standing too quickly. They're expecting you. Not me. Him. She led us past the main dining room, past tables where people lowered their voices as we passed, to a set of double doors at the back. Daniel carried a sealed folder under one arm. I watched every step he took, trying to match the man beside me with the man my mother had spent years reducing to a uniform. The private dining room went silent when we entered. 22 directors turned in their chairs. Marcus sat near the far end of the table, phone face down beside his plate. President Voss stood near the head of the room. And my mother was in the center of it all, wearing her cream suit, her promotion plaque still unopened beside her untouched wine. Her eyes landed on Daniel first, then on me. She gave a thin laugh. Daniel, this is a professional dinner. Daniel did not move behind me. He did not lower his eyes. That's why I'm here, he said. A few directors exchanged looks. President Voss stepped forward. Mr. Hale, for the record, can you confirm whether you are the licensed environmental remediation supervisor listed on the emergency compliance file for the Northbridge Hospital expansion? The room shifted like someone had opened a window in winter. I looked at Daniel. Licensed. My mother said sharply, Adrian, he works nights at one of our outpatient centers. He's custodial staff. Voss did not look away from Daniel. Mr. Hale. Daniel placed the sealed folder on the table. Yes, I hold the active hazardous materials remediation license for that district and facility category. A director near the wall whispered, that's the license we've been waiting on. Another said, I thought Northbridge was cleared. My mother's smile hardened. There must be some confusion. Daniel empties trash bins. Voss turned to her then. He took that custodial position through a third-party contractor while reviewing disposal routes after irregularities appeared in the site reports. My stomach dropped. The jacket my mother mocked had not been proof Daniel didn't belong here. It was how he got close enough to see what they were hiding. Voss picked up a tablet from the table. Marlene, your department marked 3 waste transfer logs as cleared after Mr. Hale refused clearance. My mother's face lost all colour. One director pushed back from the table. Is the hospital contract at risk? No one answered. Daniel's hand rested on the sealed folder. My mother stepped forward suddenly and reached for it. This is being taken out of context. Before her fingers touched the edge, Daniel placed his palm over the folder and held it still. Don't make this worse, he said. My mother's hand hovered over the folder for one ugly second before she pulled it back. No one moved. Not the directors. Not Marcus. Not even the servers standing near the sideboard with untouched plates in their hands. President Voss turned toward the restaurant manager. Pause service, we need the room private. The manager nodded fast and guided the servers out. The doors closed with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. My mother looked around the table, searching for someone to rescue her. 6 months ago, half these people would have laughed at her jokes about Daniel. Now they watched her like she was a document with missing signatures. Voss said, "Mr. Hale, explain what you found." Daniel opened the folder, but only halfway. My license number appeared on clearance paperwork I never signed. Before that, I noticed restricted materials from the Northbridge expansion being placed into bins labelled for routine disposal. A director at the far end sat forward. "You found that while working custodial?" "Yes," Daniel said, "that was the point." My mother snapped, "So you lied your way into one of our facilities?" Daniel looked at her. "No, I took a legitimate contractor shift. What I found was not legitimate." I suddenly understood the messages, the constant checking, the way he had hidden the unknown text in the car. He had been waiting to see if Voss would act before my mother's promotion became official. Voss turned to me. "Mrs. Hale, did Mrs. Carter contact you tonight about Daniel attending?" My mother's head whipped toward me. "Emilienne." Her voice held the old warning, the one that used to make me apologize before I knew what I had done wrong. I unlocked my phone and showed the message. "Come by yourself. Your janitor husband doesn't belong with executives." The room absorbed it in silence. My mother's mouth tightened. "That was a private family matter." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You made it public when you treated his work like it made him disposable." She stepped toward me. "You are humiliating your own mother in front of leadership." I looked at Daniel, then at the unopened plaque beside her plate. "You did that yourself." Voss opened a laptop and connected it to the private room screen. A compliance dashboard appeared, bright and undeniable. 3 clearance entries showed Daniel's license number attached to digital approvals. Daniel looked at the screen and said, "I did not authorize those." Before anyone could speak, the door opened. A woman in a grey suit stood at the threshold, with a legal folder tucked against her side. "Company counsel." Her eyes moved from Voss to Daniel to my mother. "No one leaves," she said, "until we identify who used his credentials." Company counsel stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "No one leaves," she repeated. The words landed harder than any accusation. President Voss looked at Daniel, opened the file. Daniel broke the seal and spread the documents across the table with careful hands. Not dramatic, not angry, just exact. "I was originally contracted as an independent environmental compliance specialist for the Northbridge Hospital expansion," he said. "My job was to review hazardous material disposal before final clearance." One director frowned. "Then why were you working custodial?" Daniel pointed to the first document. "Because I refused to sign this clearance 6 months ago. Restricted waste was being routed through routine disposal. When I flagged it, I was told the file would be corrected." Voss looked at the screen, then back at him, and it was. "No," Daniel said. "A week later, my license number appeared on internal approvals I never authorized." My mother stood rigid beside her chair. "That does not prove I did anything." Counsel opened her own folder. "The credential use was routed through your operations account, Mrs. Carter." "That account is accessed by staff." "Not for executive override approvals," counsel said. A director whispered, "My God." Daniel continued, "I took the custodial position through a third-party contractor because it gave me access to the actual disposal routes without alerting the department that I was still reviewing them." I looked at his faded navy jacket, the one my mother had wanted hidden from the room. The uniform she mocked was the reason he had caught them. Voss turned toward my mother. "Northbridge could be frozen over this. Insurance coverage, regulatory clearance, the hospital opening, all of it depends on valid licensed authorization." My mother's breathing grew shallow. I protected the timeline. Marcus stood from the far end of the table. His phone was in his hand. "Mom," he said quietly, "don't." She turned on him. "Sit down." But he tapped the screen and sent the full video to Voss. "I heard you before the toast," Marcus said, when Director Wells asked about Daniel. Voss played the clip. My mother's voice filled the room, light and cruel. My son-in-law, he empties trash. He wouldn't know what to do with a license except laminate it. No one laughed. Daniel stood beside me, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the table. I waited for my mother to look at him and say she was sorry. Instead, she lifted her chin. I did what I had to do for this company. That was the moment everything ended for her. Voss picked up the unopened promotion plaque and removed it from the head table. Marlene Carter's promotion is suspended pending investigation. Her system access is revoked immediately. Legal will prepare a self-report before regulators discover falsified credentials through another channel. Counsel nodded. Her incentive bonus is frozen as of tonight. A director near the door was already on his phone with the board. Another asked counsel about liability on the hospital contract. Chairs scraped. People who had toasted my mother an hour earlier would not even meet her eyes now. She looked at me like I had pushed the first domino. Outside the restaurant, she caught up to us under the awning. "You let him ruin me," she said. I stopped it. Daniel's hand was warm around mine. "No," I said. "You used his name because you thought he didn't have one worth respecting." For the first time in my life, my mother had no room full of people to perform for, no title to hide behind, no promotion plaque waiting on the table. Just silence. In the weeks that followed, the Northbridge expansion was delayed under emergency oversight. My mother was placed on administrative leave, her bonus remained frozen, and later she had to repay part of the incentive advance tied to the false clearance timeline. The company kept the contract only by cooperating, correcting the disposal process, and hiring Daniel properly under his own name. He did not celebrate it. He simply went back to work, this time through the front door, with his license file in his briefcase instead of hidden under a jacket. Marcus sent me the full video, not as gossip, but as proof that I had not imagined the cruelty, proof that Daniel had stood in a room that needed him while my mother tried to convince everyone he did not belong there. Months later, Daniel and I hosted dinner at our house. No private dining room, no directors, no titles arranged by importance. Just people who knew how to sit at the same table without ranking one another. Daniel's framed license hung in his office down the hall. He never pointed it out to guests, but sometimes I saw him pause at the doorway before turning off the light. As for me, I stopped waiting for my mother's approval before choosing my own family. My mother said my husband didn't belong with executives, but by the end of that dinner, he was the only reason any of them still had a company to protect.